Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his caucus are wrapping up their meetings in Nanaimo, British Columbia. They've been strategizing for the return to Parliament next week, where it will be anything but business as usual. The Liberals face a key by-election in Quebec, a torn-up supply and confidence deal, and threats from the Conservatives to try to force an early election. But today, the Prime Minister said he is excited to get back to work.
I can't wait to continue getting into it this fall with Pierre Poilievre, whose perspective is cuts are the only way forward, because I know that confident countries invest in their future, invest in their workers, invest in their people, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Randy Boissonnault is the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages, and he joins me now from the caucus meetings in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, David.
3 days with your caucus. Been a week since the NDP ended its supply and confidence agreement, and multiple times since then, Pierre Poilievre said he's going to try to bring your government down at the earliest possible opportunity. What's your expectation going into Parliament again on Monday?
Well, look, there's no surprise that Pierre Poilievre is going to play politics with the return to Parliament. Our job is to get back to work, return to Parliament, get legislation on the books that's going to help make the lives of Canadians better, including something like the Safe Long-Term Care Act. Look, David, we got more deals to do with more provinces and territories when it comes to the school food program. I want more on dental care, more on farm care. When I'm on the doors, as I spent a lot of time this summer, people say to me, Randy, we want you and your colleagues in Ottawa getting stuff done that makes our lives better. So look, Pierre and Jagmeet can play politics. We're going to be focused on Canadians each and every day, starting right away on Monday, September 16th.
Well, we heard from your colleague Alexandra Mendez, who said that people in her riding are saying on the doorstep, Alexandra, we don't want your leader to go because you can't win with Justin Trudeau there. How widespread was that sentiment over the course of the 3 days you were in British Columbia?
You know, teams are funny beasts, and we all came together. And look, people are in the Liberal Party are able to blow off steam and tell people what they hear. And we heard from colleagues. We got together. We shared a very clear vision for the future. We shared, exactly how it is that we're going to, have more contrast with Pierre Poilievre. But really, it's not about our party. It's not about our government. It's about delivering for Canadians and making sure the programs that they count on stay in there. And so, coming out of this caucus, people are fired up, energized. I'm ready to make sure that we take on the issues that Canadians want us to address when we get back to Parliament. And look, whenever the election happens, sometimes in 2025, we've got a team of warriors ready to go to battle to fight for Canada, and that's what I came here hoping we'd accomplished. And check mark, check mark, check mark down the line.
Yeah, I watched the Prime Minister today in his only press conference of the caucus retreat. We heard from him early this morning. And look, you've heard it. The country, there is a desire for change. You've heard it in the caucus. There is a desire for change. And what we heard from the Prime Minister today essentially was it's steady as she goes, that keep delivering on the things that you outlined there, like advancing dental care, pharmacare, the long-term care legislation that was part of the Supply and Confidence Agreement. What is the change that you're making as a government to at least try to meet and respond that mood that is out there in the country?
Well, to that question, David, I'd say stay tuned. What Canadians want us to do is keep delivering for them. Look, we've got some good news this summer, right? We've got interest rates coming down. We've got inflation settling in at that 2% Bank of Canada rate. We've got, things are getting better. People are feeling it on the ground. And look, I still, enjoyed my time as Associate Minister of Finance, and I can share with you and with Canadians that we have the healthiest balance sheet in the G7. What are we going to do with that healthiest economic position of industrialized countries? We're going to put it in the service of Canadians. And I can tell you that change is coming if Pierre Poilievre comes in and cuts childcare, cuts supports to seniors, cuts the dental care and the pharmacare. So we are going to be laying down a lot of track and making it very clear that you can have a government that cares in you and your family, or you can have a Pierre Poilievre choice, which is going to try to impose Reaganomics on our country. And David, I don't know about you, but I lived through that. And trickle-down economics don't work. You've got to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not to benefit the 1% and the richest donors, and that's what Pierre Poilievre would do should he ever take over. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we don't do that.
I know I'm half a country away, but my sense from speaking to people who are there and in your caucus and from the coverage and the interviews that I've seen, Seems like the target audience for the Prime Minister and his office these couple of days was the caucus and not necessarily the country, to try to get them all on side after an anxious summer in the wake of Toronto St. Paul's. Am I misreading it, or is that in fact what this has been about?
Oh, look, National Caucus is always about coming together, making sure that we get regional reports. Like I was part of my Prairies and North Caucus earlier this week. I attended Immigration Caucus with Minister Miller and others. I was in various different thematic caucuses throughout the time here in Nanaimo. We have to come back because the country is so darn big, as you know, David, and we spend time in our families, we spend time in our ridings. Part of National Caucus means you come back and you share all that information, and you share the good, the bad, and the ugly. You put it all together, and you develop a plan to go forward. And I can tell you, we are forward, behind the Prime Minister, behind Justin Trudeau, ready to deliver for Canadians. And whenever that election is, we're going to make sure that Canadians get a real sense of the choice they have before them.
You talk about the healthy balance sheet relative to other countries in the G7, something the Deputy Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, and others in your government speak about. But Canadians are very worried about their own individual balance sheets. We're seeing unemployment tick up. We've seen growth slow down to the point that the major banks are referring to the state of the economy as recession-like. There's a lot of concern about Canada sliding not just against the United States, but G7 peers, the OECD average, when it comes to productivity measurements on a per capita basis. I know Mark Carney has been appointed to help develop the platform for an election that could be a year away. What are the new things you're doing to jolt the economy back into life? Because dental care and these things, while important, they're not going to boost economic productivity necessarily in the business sector.
So there's a few things, and I'm glad you raised the productivity issue, David, because look, there's a bit of a productivity industry in this country talking about, I remember productivity being challenged between us and the United States when I was 12 years old. And it's been a perennial challenge for our country, in part because we are a natural resource country. And what we've done on our watch, and don't take my word for it, ask Bloomberg, where's the #1 electric vehicle supply chain in the world right now? It's Canada. And that's because of important investments that we've made in the supply chain, in workers, in building up that manufacturing supply chain. That's one example. I'll tell you what another example is of our government committing to productivity: $30 billion on a $10 a day childcare program. That releases a whole bunch of people, mostly women, into the workforce. That's also important. And look, I'll talk about my own file, temporary foreign workers, dialing back the number of people that can come in. When we do that, Benjamin Tull was out and said, look, this is going to increase productivity because those jobs are going to go into the hands of people already here. And the other thing that Francois-Philippe Champagne and I and Minister Freeland are working on with others like Mark Carney is making sure that we get the message out to businesses, Canadian business owners, that if we want more productivity between us and the United States and other G7 countries, we've got to invest more in our people, and we've got to invest more in our businesses. So that's automation, that's AI, that's technology investments, and so we can play a role in that. And look, I've got a workforce summit coming up this fall. It's the first time we've had one in 12 years. The United States does this every year, and so I'm bringing people from across the country to zero in on productivity, to zero in on developing the 21st century workforce, because that's what Canadians have asked us to do. It's what the Prime Minister asked me to do in this job, and so we're rolling up our sleeves and getting to work this fall.
I know the Prime Minister and you in this conversation have cast all of this as important, but also at risk should Mr. Poilievre win the next election, whenever that comes. How quickly do you think you'll face a confidence challenge? The parliamentary calendar is a little bit unclear to me right now as to when you will provide the first confidence vote opportunity as a government, or when the opposition may have their first chance to try to put something on the order paper to bring you down. When do you expect to see this next flashpoint in Parliament?
So, David, I'm confident that we're going to get well into 2025 before any prospect of an election happens. I think we're going to see a fall economic statement. We're going to see new legislation. We're going to see a bunch of Conservative games. Every time they have an Opposition Day motion, they're going to put the confidence thing at the end. And then we're going to have to do what we've always had to do in a minority parliament, which is find somebody to make sure that we get through that confidence motion. So could be the NDP, could be the Bloc, might even on a non-confidence motion be the Conservatives.
That's unlikely.
Let's see how it plays out. We did this from 19 to 21. We did this for the 6 months after 2021. This is how minority parliaments work. It's a case by case, issue by issue, confidence motion by confidence motion work. Corinna Gould is on it, our team is on it, and I am confident that we're well into 2025 before we're even worried about getting out the lawn signs.
I appreciate your positive vibes, Minister, but I think it's very unlikely that Mr. Poilievre and his caucus are going to vote with you on any kind of a confidence matter for as long as this Parliament lasts.
No, not a confidence one.
Yeah.
let's see.
Right.
If there's another, like there might be something where they want to they would vote with us. Parliaments in minority times in years before election are unpredictable beasts. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, if you want to scrap the carbon tax, I'm sure you'll get their vote. Look, I know things are a bit more optimistic and settled in your caucus post-Toronto St. Paul's, but just as a final point, Parliament back on Monday. I know there's 2 by-elections for your party. It's La Salle et Mar-Verdun that matters. This good mood could go away very quickly on Tuesday should you not hold on to David Lameddy's old seat. How important is that for you and your party and for the Prime Minister on Monday?
Well, all by-elections are important. La Salle et Mar-Verdun is important for us. Let's not speculate on the outcomes. I know we got lots of people on the ground talking with lots of residents. I've talked to people that I know really well who had some of the best door knocking they've ever done anywhere in the country in La Salle et Mar-Verdun on the weekend. And so we're doing what we do during by-elections and campaigns is we give it our all. And let's have a chat on Tuesday when all the votes are counted.
Okay, Randy Boissonnault, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages. Always good to speak with you. Thanks for your time. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says his party will put forward a non-confidence motion at the earliest possible opportunity. And there's those 2 high-stakes by-elections that will put almost all of the federal parties to the test.
I'm asking Jagmeet Singh and the NDP to commit unequivocally before Monday's by-elections. Will they vote non-confidence to bring down the costly coalition and trigger a carbon tax election?
I say directly to Pierre Poilievre, I'm not going to listen to you, someone who wants to destroy our healthcare system, who wants to hurt seniors by cutting their pensions, someone who wants to attack workers.
And I can't wait to continue getting into it this fall with Pierre Poilievre, whose perspective is cuts are the only way forward.
So in the lead up to the return to Ottawa, Liberal MPs have been meeting in Nanaimo, British Columbia, where the Prime Minister has been dodging calls about whether he is the right person to lead the party into the next election. So how will this all play out when summer break officially comes to an end next week? Let's bring in the power panel on that. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. Jonathan Kalis is a former Quebec advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And here with me in the studio are the Newfoundlanders. Tim Power is a former strategist for Conservative parties, and Tanda McCharles is the Toronto Star's parliamentary bureau chief. Good to see you all. Jonathan, I'm going to start with you and Andrew because if I set them going, it won't stop. I listened to the Prime Minister today, Jonathan. I mean, we've heard Pierre Poilievre threaten confidence motions before. We're going to hear him threaten confidence motions again. I listened to the Prime Minister this morning, though, at a time when the caucus and the country have been calling for change, and he basically outlined a plan for steady as she goes. I mean, where are things with the Liberals coming out of Nanaimo?
I think when you're a year out of an election, when you're trailing in the polls, people are going to be looking for the scandal or their dissension in the ranks. And yes, you had a second MP come out at the beginning of caucus and sort of kind of not really call for him not to run again or to leave. And those of you who know Alexandra Mendez, and I know her well for a long time, and she's great, and I'm shocked that it's taken this long for her to come out and complain and say that she's not happy with the way things have gone. So now you have 2 caucus members out of 150 something who have called on that. Of course, people aren't thrilled. Yes, the numbers aren't great. Yes, it's an uphill battle, but clearly they believe they have a plan and they're going to continue working at it. They've been at this for a while where the goal is not just to change the channel on where things have been for the last 2 years, year and a half, but really, there's an optimism that the economy is picking up, that inflation is going down, interest rates are going down, and it's not something you can feel immediately, but it's starting to happen. So I think they have to focus on that. I don't know what else they would.
Right.
Jagmeet Singh has set himself up for, he made this whole dramatic, I'm tearing up the agreement with no plan in mind. He goes out to microphones the day after he launched his video. He's now done it 2 days in a row in his caucus retreat, where he doesn't have an answer to the most obvious question that everybody knew would be asked, which is Pierre Poilievre at his first opportunity is going to table a non-confidence vote. And his answer is, well, we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis and see what every bill is. This is a non-confidence bill, either yes or no. So if his whole goal was to say, we're not with the Liberals, we're not going to prop them up, we have to separate ourselves from them, what's going to happen? Is he going to vote non-confidence in the government? And then what? Then what was this whole charade about? And if he does, is he really ready for elections? You saw them already, Anne McGrath, today, backtracking their caucus. Well, we're not really sure we're ready for an election. So what was this all about? The NDP seems like they're all over the place, more so than the Liberals.
Well, yeah, Andrew, I can't imagine they'll vote non-confidence if it looks like it will actually pass, right? Because I think they want time to differentiate themselves from the Liberals. But, you know, the Liberals offered a sort of status quo response today. I don't know if that's because really the target audience at this caucus retreat was the caucus to sort of calm everybody down in the run-up to what's going to happen maybe in LaSalle on Monday night. But what do you make of the landscape as the three leaders sort of set things out today?
You know, it's funny. I was looking at Twitter. I don't know why. Well, partly because I was following.
You're a masochist. But anyway, go ahead.
Must have been something like that. Don't hold that against me. But one of the things that was running today was one of the PEI Liberal fan accounts was running a bunch of the ads the Liberals had in the last election. Yeah. And I was watching it and I thought, the message hasn't changed at all for the Liberals. They haven't got it at all. You know, it's the same talking points. It's like they're going to refight the 21 election here in 2024, 25. And if that's where they're at, they've got real problems. Now, they have made progress. They have changed a lot of their policies to try to get back in line with the public. They've changed the faces in front of the camera for cabinet. That helps in some cases. I mean, obviously, Fraser and Miller are very capable in the roles that they've got now. But the talking points are the same. And if they don't figure out how to change that, if they don't figure out how to change the leader, they're in trouble. Second piece I just want to say is if they're following Johnno's strategy and they think that kicking the NDP in the shins is the way to move forward, they've made a big tactical error on what they need to do to actually win. And I think that is, you know, I don't know, maybe the NDP is prepared to you know, cash in the chips and go for the election and have a real good Donnybrook on this.
We'll see. I mean, Tanda, I noted today that the Prime Minister wasn't criticizing Jagmeet Singh. It was Pierre Poilievre was going to cut this, Pierre Poilievre was going to do this, Pierre Poilievre.
That's his rival.
Right? That's where it is. So what do you make of where the Liberals are coming out of this? Like, it was, we're going to keep delivering on the things we've been delivering on. There wasn't the big message of change that a lot of people were like kind of anticipating would come, but maybe is it just too early in the process? Where is it?
Look, they telegraphed at Cabinet that they believed delivery was the issue, that they had to persuade Canadians they are delivering good things for them, and that at caucus they would listen, still be in listening mode to hear what new ideas were coming forward from caucus. But I think most people expected they would come out of caucus with some ideas or some things that they were prepared to fight for that would represent change. And whether, you know, if it's not going to be change at the top, if it's not going to be big changes at the PMO, we have a minor change in staffing at the head of the campaign, but we don't have big policy changes. And if they're going to do a shift to the center economically, or if they're going to try to appeal to, say, those voters who think they've moved too far left in their cooperation deal with the NDP, then what is that path forward? We didn't get that signal. Right. And I'm not too surprised by it, only because that's kind of what they were signaling at Cabinet. On the other hand, it seems to me they think they've got a communications problem, a voter communications problem, not a voter fatigue problem. And that's the thing I think is their challenge.
Tim, I wonder just in terms of sequencing, if you can really sort of like unveil whatever your pivot is before you know what's going to happen in LaSalle and Verdun on Monday night. Because if you start laying the track for change right now and then you lose that seat, you're blown right out of the water.
Yeah, but it's almost like you're always waiting for something else if you're the Liberal government, right? And that seems to be their challenge. They need disruption. And if it's not going to be a leadership change, as Tanda was alluding to in terms of an economic activity, what is it? Look, they did something smart, I think, this week in getting Mark Carney out there, in as much as at least the discussion around Mark, his future, where he's going, distracted for at least, 24 to 36 hours on the current struggles inside the Liberal caucus. But when you hear the Prime Minister delivering the same lines over and over, they're either being brushed away or just simply not heard. And you almost feel like he's more in need of an intervention than anything else, because everybody else is looking at the polls. Everybody else is looking at still the dissatisfaction. Johnno's right. There are signs that the economy is improving, but people aren't feeling that.
Well, inflation's improving. I mean, unemployment's going up. Growth isn't great.
They aren't feeling what the Liberals want them to feel. So the only person who seems to have any soundtrack for this is the Prime Minister, but it's not the soundtrack anybody wants to hear. And as it is for Poilievre, Yeah, of course, in some ways he's going to call for a confidence vote. That's the job of the opposition leader. But equally, he has an audience and a body of people supporting him who are banking on him bringing change faster. So if he doesn't deliver it, no matter how gimmicky other parties may describe it, he's failing in his role. So you have this stew at the moment. As long as it doesn't include cats and dogs, I'm good.
I think there's a cognitive dissonance here.
Yes.
Overall.
Sorry, guys, it's over now.
All right, you're done. You want to go home?
I warned you. Go ahead, Tana.
Well, there's a cognitive dissonance in this sense. Like, the Liberals are trying to project positive and positivity. You heard the Prime Minister use those words today around the macroeconomic picture. Things are going to get better. It's going to look up.
Right.
And that's sort of reminiscent of the Sunny Ways vibe of 2015, but at the same time, they have to empathize with the struggles of Canadians, and you hear them use that language about, we know people are anxious about the cost of living. We're helping them address their daily concerns, and therein lies the pitch. What is the pitch? What is the message and to voters for the next campaign?
Well, Jono, I mean, the pitch is kind of the government balance sheet is good. And Tim's phone is ringing, so that's the sign of an experienced. That's the sign of an experienced television pundit right there.
We're looking
my last cat.
Good job.
For a campaign
Good job, Tom.
manager. Tim, do you want to sign up?
But John, like the argument is that the government balance sheet is good relative to the G7, and we're going to use that power to help you deal with the challenges that you're facing. That takes a bit of time, and I don't know if people are struggling with daily cost of living. Can't pay their cell phone bills, unlike Tim, and are worried about. I don't know if they're too worried about the debt to GDP ratio and the balance sheet of the federal government relative to, say, Germany and France. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't connect directly.
People aren't. That's for sure the case, and I think that's been the biggest struggle over the last 2-3 years of really this cost of living crisis that we've been living in. I don't think it's a lack of empathy. I think people in the government are concerned about how people are dealing with it, understand the challenges, and it's not like this communications issue has been lingering for a while. The real issue is, how do we talk about it? And how do we not talk about it like elites, the way that they're accused of being? Certainly not talking about macroeconomics, because the debt to GDP ratio does not impact the price of groceries. Not in anybody's mind, at least.
Sure.
So you have two challenges. One, make it micro. What is it that we're doing? Talk about the dental care, or if there's going to be a farm plan, what that's going to mean, or about childcare, things that actually impact people's pocketbooks.
Right.
The challenge remains the carbon tax and how to explain why there's an advantage for more Canadians than there isn't. They haven't won that battle. They've lost that battle so far.
Right.
And the second one is whether it's housing or continued lowering of inflation and interest rates, is that those are things that are in the medium and long term. And so they can't bank on that. People have to feel optimistic. If the election, let's say, is in 6 months or 8 months or a year, people may feel a little bit more optimistic. They may have more room to breathe. But what do we do between now and then? That's the key, is what is the actual, here are the specific tools we're going to use to help you make your life easier. And, I heard somebody... Go for it.
No, I got to get to Andrew because I got to get to a break. But just in terms of language, Pierre Poilievre talks about paychecks, Andrew, which is something you get every week or every 2 weeks. He's talking about things that are, but just on the bait, he's trying to get Jagmeet Singh to take. I want an unequivocal commitment that you're going to vote to bring down this government and plunge the country into an election. How do you expect the NDP to keep responding to that? Is it just the dismissive, I'm not going to listen to that guy?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, this is the gamesmanship, and I think that's one of the risks that Poilievre has, is that everything looks like it's a gimmick. There's not enough substance behind it beyond his, drooling of appetite to get to an election. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, yeah, okay, but we know that that's not going to work. So, what are you guys going to do? Like, what's next? And we're not seeing that from him. The problem, of course, for the Liberals is that, yeah, they've got some of this stuff. Most of the stuff that Jono listed off would never have happened if it hadn't been for them falling into a minority and the NDP forcing it. I mean, why did it take 6 years to do childcare? Why did it take 8 years to do a dental plan? So that's kind of sits there, and it reminds people, going way back to 2015, about the broken promises around, things like electoral reform. That for a new generation really is important. And those kind of issues, I think a lot of that, the advantage for the Liberals is almost all of it is boxed up and tagged onto the Prime Minister. Right. Not the Liberal Party itself, which is kind of interesting, but tagged to the Prime Minister. And, it makes it a lot easier for them then to figure out, Well, what's the last lever to pull?
Right.